So as many of you know now, Fnaf World had a controversial release standing out among the rest of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, but I feel like the one thing it had in common with the other games was its connection to the lore, or at least the amount of lore that was in the game. So in this video, I want to cover some Fnaf World theories related to the crying child, and see if I can find an answer to the question of, does it even matter? Because Fnaf World might not even be canon to Five Nights at Freddy's. My name's Arcade, and this is Theory Review, where I cover some interesting and strange gaming theories. Five Nights at Freddy's crying child is a well-known character and even a playable one in Fnaf World. So when I got this comment on one of my Fnaf World videos, it kind of surprised me. The thing is, it feels too meta to have a playable character actually be inside the game that takes place inside that character's mind, if that makes sense. But there is some interesting evidence for it. Don't worry, I'll explain that here in a bit. The comment basically is saying that everything in the game takes place inside the mind of the crying child, or more specifically, how the crying child wants to see the world or their perception of it. For example, there are different layers through the glitches, each representing a sort of mask that the child puts on. And when you go further down, it reveals a child being sad and crying. This player model can be seen as the crying child, and with details like the map being a brain, you can draw the connection between the world being from the perspective of the child. This comment also goes on to say that the final layer, with Old Man Consequences, is the reality of the child facing death, and that to help them reach peace, you need to show him a comforting memory. The most compelling evidence to this theory for me is, like the comment mentioned, is that Glitch Fredbear tells you to go deeper and that the game at face value is a facade. Before we analyze this a little bit further though, we need to give context for who the crying child is, which might be easier said than done. One very old post says that it's strange that there is only one crying child, and points out how, because during the attacks they have a green shirt, it could be connected to the Stage 01 minigame in FNAF 1, where only one child goes missing. This would explain why it's only one child, because presumably the ghost wouldn't be able to possess an animatronic, but I don't find this as credible, though I still wanted to mention it because I think it's interesting and it's pretty cool to show old theories, even though that they might be outdated. More commonly, people say it's Evan online due to the FNAF logbook, but even that might be wrong since it's based off this game inside the logbook itself. And that's going off the assumption that the crying child might be the son of William Afton, or even Michael's brother. I keep using the word might and maybe because this extra stuff is speculation, you know, like the extra boring things like character and plot. Without getting too distracted, we can sort of put together why the crying child made up this scenario if you believe this theory. If the crying child really is William Afton's son, maybe even possibly the same one who we play as in FNAF 4, again that's just a theory, it would explain the perspective of them trying to pretend everything is fine and feeling the need to put on a mask. From the child's perspective, this game might be a way to cope with the scary events in Five Nights at Freddy's. And even if the child is actually a victim of William Afton, instead, that could also be the case. I'm just using other theories to provide context for this one, which could be muddying the waters, so let's just take a look at this theory standalone. This is a good time to mention that the purpose of this video really isn't to create new theories, and the purpose of the series isn't for that. I'm not MatPat, he's built different. I just like learning and sharing different theories online, even though some might not be true. It's just fun, and it provides a creative perspective on the narrative of FNAF. You guys can argue about the theories in the comments, but really I just think it's fun to explore different narrative devices that theories lend themselves to. Standalone, without even really knowing who the crying child is, this theory is creative and unconventional. I really hate the trope of it was all just a dream, but this really doesn't feel like that because it breaks down the emotions of the character and even gives the dark ending of helping its spirit move on. Depending on the interpretation, Fredbear could just be a manifestation of the child's own thoughts or self-reflection. It could also be the same Fredbear that William Afton speaks through, but that's a different theory. It would also give context for the security owl because that could just be the child's own defense mechanism to cope that prevents you from digging deeper through the game. I'm sure that there are definitely cracks here and there, and if you find some, leave a comment, but I really like the narrative behind this theory. A child involved in the dark past of Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria creates a fun world inside their head to process everything. And even through their own subconscious, manifested in Glitch Fredbear, looks deeper at how reality really is and starts to peel off each layer and mask that covered up this dangerous world, before being eventually freed and allowed to move on. The problem with the "it was all just a dream" stories is that there is no point or stakes really, because in the end it all reverts back to the status quo. It's like a useless what if. A lot of stories use it just to be fan service really, or give like a what if scenario without committing to it. But with this, it more so feels like a deconstruction of the character's experience. And if you include that part with the old man consequences, the child's journey to passing on. I really like theories that include a cohesive narrative, not just something that makes sense for the story, but something that makes a good story. Hot take, I know. And this is a theory that definitely has components of that. FNAF theories sometimes get too complex in details that, while they make sense, it just doesn't make for a good story, whether at the fault of the actual narrative or the theory itself. So I find some that, while they might be a little inaccurate, but provide a really well-rounded story and cohesive narrative that is fulfilling, I think those work significantly better. Of course, you can nitpick theories because it's FNAF lore, but until something is offensively bad or weird, I'm not going to be harsh with pointing out the flaws or tearing it down. Though I do want to address one issue. Before I talk about Fnaf World's canon status, which is weird, I do want to cover the big aspect of the game that is missed out with this theory. The biggest plot hole I can think of is Scott's inclusion of himself in the game. Fnaf World is a love letter to the franchise and has a lot of meta components, especially with the Halloween update. And I've talked more in depth on that before, and if you're interested, you can check out that video too. The thing is, none of that makes sense with the context of this theory because of how loud some of those components are, especially when you fight Scott Cawthon himself. It's just sort of awkward to connect that to Five Nights at Freddy's lore, which brings up an interesting question of just how canon is the game itself to the lore. From Scott's interview with Daco, it seems like he didn't like Fnaf World being connected with the lore, though that's just not exactly confirmation on whether it actually is. I think it works really well as a celebration of Five Nights at Freddy's through the meta aspects and even as a reaction to criticism. However, those aspects of the game seem to conflict with the actual fitting into the overall timeline itself, at least in a clean, coherent way that would deliver an impactful narrative. It would ultimately depend on the theory and timeline, which might seem like a vague and unsatisfying answer, but I think that opens up the door to people getting creative with their own interpretations of the story. And I also think ignoring those aspects of the game, like the minigame where Scott goes on about making FNAF spin-offs, or even just some of the snarky dialogue, and even just straight up the whole Halloween update in general, would do the game a disservice. It's a big part of the game in its presentation, and missing out on that would just be missing a big point of the game in general. I'd love to explore more theories with Fnaf World specifically. It's just that narratively, I think it'll be challenging to address those meta aspects since they're so ingrained into the game itself. Because imagine actually inserting the maker of the game and essentially the real world into FNAF. I just see it being extremely difficult to explain away. I haven't kept up with the recent games. I think if my memory serves me correctly, they might have done something similar with that of the VR stuff, but I still need to watch MatPat's newer FNAF videos to see that. I really haven't kept up after Security Breach. All in all, I do like this theory. I think it's a fun way to imagine the story, and if I'm interpreting it right, it's a cool way to deliver the crying child's character while still being vague on who it actually is. That's sort of the thing I've noticed with FNAF lore. You might not understand the full story, but there are small moments that really shine through. I mean, it was to the point where in FNAF 6, the first time I heard Henry's speech, I didn't get the full story, but for some reason it was still impactful. Then after getting a better sense of the timeline, while some parts might have been inaccurate, I rewatched it and it hit even harder. I feel like if I come up with a rating system, it might be a bit harsh towards the theory or overly critical, and I don't want that. It's hard to say anything with certainty in Five Nights at Freddy's lore, so I will be calling this a theory, and I do want to rate it, but in like a fun way. So I'm going to give it 8 Freddy Fazbears. I like the theory a lot. To the person who put the theory in my comment section, thank you so much. I do like this theory a lot, and it just dug me down deeper into the rabbit hole of Fnaf World theories. While a lot of them are dated because the game itself is outdated, or older, I should say, a lot of stuff is inaccurate now, but it's still fun to explore, and I think that this series, if I were to continue it, would be just a really fun exploration of weirds and strange theories that might not be completely accurate or even well known because they don't fit into the overall timeline. That being said, if you guys like this video, Make sure to leave a like just to show me that you guys like this type of video. It's kind of a new series that I want to work on where I break down Fnaf World theories, or no, just straight up Five Nights at Freddy's theories. There's a bunch of strange ones that wouldn't really even be covered because they might not fit into like someone's overall timeline. They're just so huge, but breaking down specific theories itself would be really fun, and there's a lot of ones I've saw and wanting to share. So if you want to support the channel or show me that you like this video, make sure to subscribe. It's a quick and easy button, and it helps out the channel so much. You have no idea. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and as always, I hope you're a bit less bored.